Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cedric Alexander, Deputy Mayor. I'm here on behalf of Mayor Lovely Warren this afternoon, who was not able to be with us. I would like to welcome the City Operations Facility and thank you for taking part in this wonderful ceremony today. And I am proud to be joined by Assemblyman Harry Brunson, along with friends and colleagues in labor. Bill Slocum, President of AFSCME Local 1635, and Dan Maloney, President of the Rochester, Genesee Valley Area Labor Federation, Bruce Popper, Vice President of the SEIU 1199 chapter. Also here with us, I want to acknowledge Sheriff Todd Baxter, officials from CSEA, SEIU, UAW, AFSCME, PEF, and New York State Teachers Union. Also, our Adam Bello is here with us as well. To you there? Okay, there you are, Adam. But anyway, as of today, we also have Commissioner Norm Jones and his team from the Department of Environmental Services. And I would also like to thank all of our city employees here with us today and all the hard work in serving the citizens of this great community here in Rochester. On this day, February 1st, all across the country, communities are gathering with men and women in labor to recognize a turning point in our nation's history. 50 years ago in Memphis, Tennessee, two sanitation workers, Echol and Robert Walker, were killed on the job because they were working on old equipment that malfunctioned. The sanitation workers in Memphis had warned the city about the malfunctioning equipment, and they were ignored. In addition, they were fed up with the poverty wages and that they had been paid, and with the rampant racial discrimination taking place. So the death of their two colleagues was the tipping point that caused the city 1,300 sanitation workers to walk off the job and march under the banner, "I am a man" or a woman. That was the 1968 Memphis Sanitations Workers Strike. The strike caught the attention of Dr. Martin Luther King, who traveled to Memphis in support of the workers. It was there that he gave his famous speech, from the mountaintop speech that we all are very familiar with, calling for unity, economic actions, boycotts, and nonviolent protests, while challenging the United States to live up to its ideals. In what would be his final speech, King said, "Let's rise up tonight with a greater readiness, let us stand with a greater determination, and let us move on these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation." He was assassinated the very next day. Now more than ever, we must remember Dr. King's words as we continue his fight for equal rights, opportunity, and justice, both here in Rochester and across our great nation. Now more than ever, with the middle class under attack in some ways, we must all stand up and protect our workers to ensure not only a fair wage but safe and sanitary working conditions. And now more than ever, we must support our friends and neighbors in labor. Labor built the American middle class. Let me say that again. Labor built the American middle class, and labor continues to fight for the protections of all workers, all of us. Today we remember not only Echol and Robert Walker, but the many workers who have died and have been injured on the job. I would like to thank my friends and neighbors to know that I stand with you in support of our workers, myself along with Mayor Lovely Warren. I would now like to invite Assemblyman Harry Brunson to the podium for a few words.
Thank you, Doctor. And what an honor it is to be here today. As a person who's been involved in the labor movement for a number of years, and a person who has dedicated my life work to social, racial, economic justice. And we really really need to take moments like today to remember those who came before us. As we ask women and men to perform difficult jobs, whether they're sanitation workers, whether they're police officers, whether they're teachers, whether they're construction workers, and we can go on and on, healthcare workers. We need to make sure that they are in places that are safe, that there are safe working conditions. We need to make sure that they are getting paid a fair wage, a livable wage. We need to make sure that if they get injured on the job, they have workers' compensation insurance. We need to make sure that not only do they provide for themselves during their work years and provide for their children, but they also have retirement benefits so that they can have a quality life after retirement. We need to make sure that as we remember the tragic deaths of Echol and Robert Walker in 1968, that we ask ourselves the question, what are we doing to make sure that we have equality and justice in our society? What are we doing to make sure that we have workers' rights in our society? Unfortunately, even today, many of the battles that Echol and Robert and many of their brothers and sisters in solidarity fought, we continue to fight. I remember the words of Reverend James Lawson as he addressed the striking workers in Memphis. He said, "At the heart of racism is the idea that a man is not a man, that a person is not a person." Think about that in the context of what's happening in our country today. Think about that as we have a federal administration that is saying that people are something other. And if you are an other, you're not only different, but you don't deserve the dignity and respect as those who are sane. And even worse, you are a threat. And we have an administration that's doing that on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, on the basis of where somebody is born, what country, and how they came to our country. But the Reverend, when he acknowledged, Reverend Lawson acknowledged what racism was at that time, he also then, to counter racism, he affirmed, however, you are human beings, you are men, you deserve dignity. And the I Am movement was part of that. My life has been dedicated to one simple proposition. No matter who you are, what you look like, who you love, or where you come from, we all have inherent dignity. We all deserve respect, full equality, justice, and an opportunity to succeed. While progress for that ideal has been too slow in too many ways, it is imperative that we continue the fight of the generations who came before us, to honor the lives of those we have lost, and to ensure that future generations have the opportunities that the Memphis Sanitation Workers did not. Each of us, no matter our station, must ask, what can we do to end the racial disparities in income and wealth and education and life expectancy that still plagues our society? In solidarity with those who have been treated unjustly, let us rededicate ourselves to full equality. And let's rededicate ourselves to the words, I am, you are, we are. I ask all of us, as we move into a moment of silence, to think about those we have lost, but also think about how we can contribute. And with that, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, and he's been involved in the labor movement for many, many years, and give a loud round of applause for Vice President of Council 66, Bill Slocum. Bill.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I want to start out by saying thank you to Mayor Lovely Warren, her staff, Commissioner Jones for working with us to mark this important anniversary. Thank you also our brothers and sisters of AFSCME, the Rochester Labor Council, SEIU, and members of the labor movement who joined us today. Again, my name is Bill Slocum. I am the president of AFSCME Local 1635, which represents non-uniformed city employees of almost 1,200. I'm also the vice president of AFSCME Council 66 with over 8,000 public service workers across upstate New York. 50 years ago, in 1968, 2 public workers in Memphis were killed on the job. Echol and Robert Walker were sanitation workers, the type of people we count on every day to clean up our streets and keep our cities beautiful. But because of the color of their skin, they were denied basic safety protections at work. 50 years ago, these 2 men got caught in a thunderstorm, and Echol and Walker were tragically killed when their truck compactor malfunctioned. They were both members of AFSCME Local 1733, and their deaths lit a spark. Memphis Sanitation Workers went on strike and declared with a uniform voice the simple phrase, "I am a man." Dr. Martin Luther King joined the striking workers to call for humanity and dignity for workers of every race, background, and profession. The day before his assassination, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered a famous mountaintop speech in Memphis, rallying these workers with a message of solidarity and hunger for economic justice. 50 years later, we reflect on those troubling days. We recognize how far we've come, but also how far we have to go. I've also believed that the labor movement and the civil rights movement are 2 parts of the same struggle. The right to provide for your family, free from discrimination, and jobs is an essential part of what it means to be an American worker. Let us not forget the sacrifices of workers like Echol and Walker as we look forward to the day when all who work for a living will be treated with dignity and respect. Now I'd like to give, and it's a great honor, to introduce the next speaker, a good friend and a great labor leader, President of the Rochester Labor Council, Dan Maloney.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, thanks Dan, D. Clementi, Billy Slocum, and all the workers here at AFSCME, and Mayor Lovely Warren and her staff for putting this important event together. And I think we do owe a shout out to our new sheriff, who in a matter of weeks got those jail deputies a contract. So thank you, Sheriff. So we are here today to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the tragic death of 2 men in Memphis, Tennessee. A tragedy that set in motion a historic strike for worker justice. A strike that helped to ensure Brother Echol and Brother Walker did not die in vain, but rather, by gathering here, we honor their memory. And it is only right that we pledge to continue the fight for social and economic justice. I'm a proud member of the United Auto Workers Union. One of our greatest leaders, Walter Reuther, saw early on that the best way to build power and win justice is by standing together with like-minded people of good conscience. He knew that civil rights, women's rights, labor rights, human rights are all part of the same struggle. So the UAW was the first major union to back Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement back in the 50s. Walter Reuther addressed the crowd to open the historic March from Selma and joined Dr. King in the protest at Birmingham, where they were met with fire hoses and police dogs. It was Reuther that bailed Dr. King out of jail following that demonstration. Dr. King wrote his famous "I Have a Dream" speech at UAW Solidarity House and previewed that speech at a march in Detroit before he put together the March on Washington. So it was only natural when Dr. King joined in the strike in Memphis, the UAW followed. We have a moral obligation to ensure the health and safety of our brothers and sisters on the job. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. And I have to paraphrase, maybe plagiarize, my good sister Bess Watts. If you want a safe workplace, join a union. If you want fair wages and good benefits, join a union. If you want to help end workplace discrimination, join a union. If you believe, thank you, if you believe that working together we can build a bit better community, a better state, and a stronger nation, then join with us in the labor movement, and in true solidarity, we will get the job done. So thank you once again. God bless. Yeah. The next speaker up to the podium is our good brother, Bruce Popper, SEIU.
Oops. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I'm not used to having the chorus behind me. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. That's better. All right. In the struggle that we have before us, it is important to know the history of our movement. So I want to acknowledge the decision to hold this memorial and to hold it in a workplace of environmental workers. I want to also acknowledge the city of Rochester in its declaration of the 200th anniversary of Frederick Douglass's birth, and to salute the members of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. It was unions such as AFSCME, the UAW, as Dan said, and Local 1199, who joined Dr. King in opposing the immoral war in Southeast Asia and in organizing low-wage workers, regardless of race, thereby uniting the civil rights movement and the labor movement in the strongest voice for justice in that time. February 1, 1968. At the end of a miserable cold workday, Coles and Walker's soiled, worn-out clothes smelled of garbage. The city did not provide them with gloves, uniforms, or a place to shower. They did hard work, heavy work, lifting garbage trucks, carrying them on their shoulders, or heads, or push carts to dump their contents into outmoded trucks. On this particular day, Cole and Walker rode in a precarious, stinking perch between a hydraulic ram used to mash garbage into a small wad and the wall of the truck's cavernous container. As crew chief Willie Crane drove the loaded garbage packer along Colonial Street to the Shelby Drive dump, he heard the hydraulic ram go into action, perhaps set off by a shovel on the outside of the vehicle that had jarred loose and crossed some electrical wires. He pulled the truck over to the curb at 4:20 p.m., but the ram already was jamming Cole and Walker into the compactor. One of the men lurched forward and nearly escaped, but the ram snagged his raincoat and dragged him back. He was standing there at the end of the truck. Suddenly it looked like the big thing just swallowed him, said a horrified woman standing by. Echol, Cole, and Robert Walker died 50 years ago today. Given the fact that literally thousands of workers still die every year in work-related accidents, there was nothing so remarkable in their deaths than the events that they triggered. Their deaths exposed worker exploitation. Their deaths exposed racism and moral corruption in the city of Memphis and indeed in the entire nation. But most importantly, their deaths demonstrated Frederick Douglass's maxim that the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those who they oppress. For the sanitation workers in Memphis, the limit of their tyrant had been reached. On February 12, they walked off the job and said, "Enough is enough." Their struggle against the racist white establishment and the bosses who would exploit their labor goes down in history in part because it became the most prominent battle in Dr. King's last campaign, the Poor People's Campaign, a campaign that embraced the people of all races and all persuasions. On March 18, 1968, in a prior visit to Memphis, Dr. King declared, "Now our struggle is for genuine equality, which means economic equality." In this 50th anniversary of that watershed year, 1968, we find ourselves in much the same fight. In places like Rochester, some workers are no longer exploited and discriminated against because of the efforts of unions like AFSCME and UAW and my union. But the sad truth is that most workers continue to be exploited, that racism is alive and well in our county, and poverty rampant in our city. And while the U.S. Supreme Court is about to deliver another blow against working people's organizations, the Trump administration spews racist poison to divide working people. Well, I have some news for the hate mongers and for the exploiters. The limits of tyrants have once again been reached. Our Mayor, Lovely Warren, has dedicated her second term to the fight for economic equality, citing Dr. King's Memphis remarks. Reverend William Barber of the Moral Mondays movement has called for a new Poor People's Campaign on this 50th anniversary year. So we have work to do right here in Rochester, supporting our mayor, raising the wages of all workers to self-sufficiency, and attacking structural racism, and joining the national movement for a new Poor People's Campaign. As we mark the 200th anniversary of Frederick Douglass and the 50th anniversary of those fateful events of 1968, and as we draw inspiration from our own history and those that came before us, we must pledge anew to carry on the fight in 2018, the fight for economic justice for all people until the battle is won. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Reverend Jeff Simmons.
Let's give these speakers an arousing applause. As we stand in a moment of silence, I want to share these words of Martin Luther King, of his speech on the mountaintop. There were two phrases that were stuck out in his speech, and it was, "I wouldn't stop there, and I would move on." As we celebrate and honor this day with the city and AFSCME, we as a people, a city, and in service to the people, we must continue to protest against injustice and move on, that's the phrase, celebrating diversity and equality for all people to enrich our great city and the world. As we honor the 50th anniversary of the two sanitation workers killed in Memphis, I ask you to bow your head for a moment of silence. Amen.
Thank you, everybody, for coming on this great 50th anniversary for these two young men. So thank you very much, and thank you, everybody here at AFSCME.
and all the other union leaders that are here. Thank you again. Have a good day.
Run around, yeah.